Testing. There we go. Yep, we're good. Sure. How's that? Is that better? Should we start? Yeah, go ahead. We're starting. Hi, it's great to be back. Okay, this is a new thing. I've never done this before, but over the last, since really the pandemic, I was recruited to write some pieces for this outfit called the Visual Commentary on Scripture, which is an outfit based at King's College in London. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but it got me interested in the visual interpretation of Scripture. So I've actually done some work myself. So let me just start by talking about art itself like this. Who's ever been to the Louvre? How close did you get? Yeah.
We were the only two people in the room.
Oh, how'd you do that? Oh my gosh. Yeah, when I got there, everybody, you know, they're all got their fingers. And you know, the irony, of course, is that the Da Vinci is in this room with three or four other absolute masterpieces of Renaissance art. No one notices that they're doing it. So you know, clearly, I mean, museums, art galleries have tremendous crowds coming to these. You have to ask, what's this about? And of course, with many, if you watch people, they'll go to the art institute, and there's a painting, and there's a wall thing. Okay, so people come up, and the first thing they'll do is look at the wall painting, and they'll take one look and go on to the next thing. So I once taught a class at seminary. It was called Acts of Attention. Acts of Attention. And we actually went to the National Gallery, and I gave them instructions. I said, you must choose. I gave them a whole list of paintings that had to do with scriptural references. I said, I want you to choose one of these paintings. I want you to stand in front of it for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Has anyone ever stood in front of a painting for 10 minutes? For one thing, the guards get a little weird. But to give that amount of attention to a work of art is unusual in these days, especially in these crowded museums. So, yeah, this is an example of what I'm not going to want to talk about today. What I do want to talk about, however, is the long-standing relationship of the visual to the theological. This is a quotation from a guy named Nicephorus of Constantinople. No one's ever heard of him. But the year 817 is an important year in the history of Christianity because that's when the iconoclastic controversy, where in the Eastern Church, all the images were destroyed because they were said to be idolatrous. But the idolaters, as they were called, in the end won because they said, no, this was not, you weren't worshiping the work of art. You were seeing through the work of art to the thing divine. So if the gospel gains faith in the hearing, just as worthy of honor is the picture which visually brings home to us the same teaching. Visually brings home to us the same teaching. Painting, indeed, excels verbal teaching in speed, and sight is better than hearing to achieve the persuasion leading to faith. Painting thus becomes gospel. Wow, I just love this guy. Okay, but we are in a world that is besotted with images, But images go like this. I mean, TikTok. It's TikTok. This is what it's like. So for actually to actually contemplate an icon like this most famous one by Rublev, which is now in the Triptych Gallery in Moscow, is to actually enter into the world of the artist, the world of the painting, and as Nicephorus would say, the world of the gospel. Okay. Well, I chose this probably because I love this, but also because today I want to talk about the number 3. The number 3. If those who remember last year about Dante, that Dante wrote the entire Divine Comedy, it's kind of a meditation on number 3. All right, there are 3 canticles. Each canticle has 33 cantos in it. It's in terza rima, which is 3 rhymes that interlect and go on for 3 huge books. And of course, in many ways, for a medieval artist, that's a tribute to the Trinity, okay? Which is, of course, what this is called. And what's wonderfully mysterious about this, the more you look at it, the more you wonder, is this the Trinity? Are they the same figure? Are they different from one another? Are they gathering around a table? Is that the Eucharist in the middle? Or, wait a minute, are these the 3 angels who Abraham and Sarah received unaware that they were angels in the wonderful New Testament story? Put a caption on it. Okay. The thing is, it insists that you stop and you meditate and you gather the thoughts around this image. All right. Well, there is also there is an artistic, there's a way of painting that's in 3. Just by the way, I recommend this. This is the visual commentary on Scripture. This is the website. It's vcs.org. Their aim was it's Anglican, for every Sunday gospel passage, they would hire a writer to identify 3 images from Western art and comment on each of them in the light of the gospel passage. So if you have a gospel passage and you go to this website and you type it in, you'll get 3 images to think about. So it's a wonderful thing, and they do they call them exhibitions. And they hire people to write exhibitions. So they hired me, and they pay. Oh my gosh, they pay. So you get to you choose. I was asked to write on the presentation, Luke chapter 2, and so I chose 3 images. The middle one it's Duccio. It's in the cathedral in Siena, and the other 2, one is a version of the other, and one of it is by Mantegna. And the other was by Bellini, who is Mantegna's brother-in-law. And with the one on the right, Bellini, you can see he expanded the picture. Anyway, so what you do is you write. So there are 3, and I thought, okay, 3. Hey, what is this 3 thing? Who knows the story of Goldilocks and the? Who knows the story of the 3 little? There is a whole notion in folklore studies that stories are told in 3s. There are always 3. That's what the brain remembers. Da da ba, da da ba. Jesus' parables are often in 3s. The parable of the wedding feast. He sends out one group and they're rejected. He sends out another group and they're rejected. And he sends out the 3rd group, and that's the one that matters. Okay. So this in folklore and just the way in which we understand stories, 3 is pretty common. And so what painters have done is taken that seriously and have created paintings in 3s. And they're called triptychs. The tick is the Greek for just panel, so 3 panels. So I have several to show you, just to show you what it's like. So there's. In some ways, this is it's a piece of practical art because there's hinges there, and so you can close the painting off, and then open it up, close it in certain seasons like Lent, and then open it in certain seasons like this is the Annunciation. So you open it in March for the Feast of the Annunciation. You'll find this if you go to the cloisters in New York. This is in the cloisters in New York. It's by a French artist named Campin. It's probably 15th century. It's one of the most beautiful things. When you notice the central panel is the main act, okay? If you look it up, there's all kinds of symbolism in this painting about her virginity. There's one candle burning, one candle not. In the middle, there's a vase of lilies. Always in Annunciation paintings, between the angel and the Virgin, there's some lilies. So if you look at if you gather 20 Annunciation pictures, you're going to find different versions, variations on this theme. But what I love about this the triptych, is that there's 2 other episodes that are sort of kind of related. Okay, on the left, those 2 figures, they paid for the painting. They're the patrons. They have and notice what they're doing. They're looking in the door. So they are witnessing the scene, all right, or painted as if they were there, all right? So they're one set of spectators, okay? And then this guy, you know who this is? It's Joseph. It's Joseph. And through the window, you actually can see the wonderful Flemish landscape, the city. And Joseph, people thought forever, what is he doing? What is he doing? He's a carpenter, but he's got a drill, and he's drilling holes into things. Well, it turns out that there was a kind of legend that Joseph would make mousetraps to catch the devil, to catch the devil. So he's over here completely oblivious to what's going on there. They're over here wonderfully active, looking, and yet Joseph is also clearly preparing to defeat the devil at the end. It's a wonderful painting. But you see, the triptych works by, if it was just one panel in the middle, it would be a great story. But to add the other two complicates the story, deepens the story. And that's why painters are so attracted to the triptych form, particularly theologically. So here's another one. Woof. This is at the Prado in Spain. This is by Hieronymus Bosch. It's called The Garden of Earthly Delights. Bosch is one of the strangest artists ever. But you see, again, it's 3 panels. There's the Garden of Earthly Delights in the center. This is, on the left is the creation of Adam and Eve, okay? And on the right, oh my gosh, it's an image of the last things and what happens when Adam and Eve have sinned, okay? So you start with Adam and Eve, you walk through this wonderfully crazy utopia paradise, but if you keep going, this is where you might end up, okay? If you abuse the creation you've been given. That's one way to look at this painting. I was in Madrid last year. People stand in front of this thing and just look and look and look and look. And Bosch would have been very happy because that's why he did it this way. It envelops you, it takes you in. So in effect, it's again the rule of 3. There's a story to be told. I'm going to tell it in 3 parts. Okay. This bed is too hard. This bed is too soft. This bed is just right. Okay. That's the deal. Here's another famous one. This is Rubens. This is 17th century. This is the deposition from the cross. It's a fascinating thing. Again, patrons on the left. This is the presentation of Jesus in the temple. And so Rubens, well, it's never really clear here with triptychs whether the patron told him what the story should be, or whether the artist came up with it itself. But at any rate, it's the artist interpreting this. So as someone who is a Christian looking at this painting, he forces you to ask yourself, what's the connection of the presentation in the temple to the deposition from the cross? This is not a trick question. It's a deep question. Okay? If you look just at the way he's got a kind of it goes down this way in terms of the eye, and here the diagonal is this way. So in some ways, they're mirror images of each other. Do you remember when when the baby is presented in the temple, what Simeon says? Now let your servant depart in peace, because I have seen my salvation. But he looks at Mary and says, a sword will pierce your heart. And this is a baby who is born to make a contradiction. Rubens knew this. Rubens was a very devout Catholic. So he knew the situation. So there's a story, and again, notice on that side, they're looking in. They're looking in. So a triptych is a kind of how to put it? I was just in Assisi a couple months ago, I think of it as, you know, it's almost like going through the architecture of a shrine. When you go to Assisi, there's an upper church, a lower church, and the crypt. And you start in the upper church, and then you go down to the lower church, and the crypt is where Francis is buried. So there's, again, that sort of triple way. And remember Dante, you have Inferno, Purgatorio, Paradiso. So what got me interested in triptychs was that it's parallel to this ancient tradition of Trinitarian thinking. Now, it's not just religious artists, and I'm going to shock you now. So, you know, this is rated R. Francis Bacon, not the 16th century philosopher, but the 20th century British painter, Francis Bacon, painted probably 32 triptychs. He was not a believer, but he was fascinated by the crucifixion. And so, famously, during the Second World War, during the Blitz, he painted this: 3 studies for figures at the base of a crucifixion. It's one of his earliest and most really horrific paintings. I mean, it's beautiful in its horror. And I associate, as he would, I associate this painting with this one, as he would. The images of the crucifixion always have people at the foot of the cross in various states of mourning. And he, during the London Blitz, as a young painter, decided this was what it felt like. You know, there's all the hours just mouths. Okay. And then he had this one, 3 studies for a crucifixion. Again, it's all about the meat. It's all about the meat. And he was inspired by 3 paintings, one by Rembrandt, one by Soutine, and this upside down is the famous Cimabue crucifix in Florence that was damaged during the Great Flood. But if you think of it upside down, you don't see Jesus, all you see is flesh. So this is what he said. I've always been very moved by pictures about slaughterhouses and meat. And to me, that belonged very much to the whole thing of the crucifixion. There have been extraordinary photographs which have been done of animals just being taken up before they were slaughtered in the smell of death. We don't know, of course, but it appears by these photographs that they're so aware of what's going to happen to them, they do everything to attempt to escape. I think these pictures were very much based on that kind of thing, which to me is very, very near this whole thing of the crucifixion. I know for religious people, for Christians, the crucifixion has a totally different significance. But as a non-believer, it was just an act of man's behavior to another. I consider that a religious statement, even though he didn't. So you see the triptychs, the rule of 3, can be at once very comforting, but also quite provocative. And it then extends across the spectrum from religious art to secular art. Okay. So I do a lot of traveling, as you might have figured out. So I decided I'm going to do triptychs. As a photographer. And this is the first thing I did. I was not interested in storytelling. I was interested in texture. I was interested in, these are 3 different walls. And they're quite, I think they're very beautiful. They're in 3 different countries. They're in 3 different places. And so, if I just show you these as just to enjoy, when you look at it, I love the texture of the bricks on the left. I love the way that the pollarded bushes are stark against this ancient wall. And this is quite mysterious until I tell you what it is. I also like the middle one because actually I took that photograph at the Belvedere Museum in Vienna, which is where Gustav Klimt worked. And I liked it because it looked just like a Klimt painting. So if I tell you now where they're from, does what you see change? Okay. The first one is a 13th century pavement from the Basilica of San Stefano in Bologna, which was built as, it's actually a set of 7 churches all joined together. And in the middle of it is a replica of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. So if you can't get to Jerusalem, you can get to Bologna. Okay. And that's the pavement. This, as I say, is in the middle of Vienna, which is, and the Belvedere is just full of this art from this movement just before the outbreak of the First World War and the beginning of all this change in the world. Any idea what the third one is? Before the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 BCE in Pompeii, 10 years before there had been an earthquake in Pompeii. And as they keep digging, they keep finding things. People were already rebuilding when the volcano erupted. And this is a rebuilt wall, and that set of bricks that are inlaid, it's to guard against earthquake damage. It's to strengthen the wall against the earthquake. So, now, I used to say to my students, the more you know, the more you know. So now when I look at these, I think of the places where they are, and then but I can then step back and just forget about the places and just enjoy them for what they look like. Okay? And that's always the issue with art, is that, am I supposed to know something, or can I just enjoy it? So I decided, okay, I'm going to try to do story time with triptychs. So here's another one. I'm going to just let you look in silence for a minute. Knowing what you know about triptychs, what do you see? There are no right answers to this, okay? So what's in the middle? They're letters, right? I mean, it's writing in the middle. On the right, it's a very tired-looking Jesus. And on the left, it's prisoners behind some kind of cage. All right, now I'm going to tell you some things about where this is taken, and why I wanted to put these together. All of these 3 images are from Prague. The first one is the Charles Bridge. Is a very famous bridge across the Charles River, and it's punctuated by these incredible Baroque structures. And this structure here is a monument to the 2 people who are the 2 figures at the top who were martyred. And in this prison there are 3 famous Prague prisoners. So you just walk along the bridge and you just see these things. So that's one. The second one is more moving than this. This is in Prague. There are 3 synagogues. You realize in Prague during the Second World War, the Jews were eliminated from Prague. But this is one of the oldest synagogues in Prague. In the 1950s, a group of artists decided they wanted to inscribe on the walls of this synagogue the date of birth, the date of death of every Jew from Prague who was killed. It is, you see on the right, those walls, that's not decoration, those are all names. Those are all names as you walk through that synagogue. 79,000 names. 79,000 names. And if you could, it's just overwhelming. When you realize it's just 60 years ago. Okay. So I put that at the center of the triptych. And then this is in a huge Baroque church not far from that synagogue. Big Christian church. And that statue is called Ecce Homo. Behold the man. Behold the man. And it's Jesus in the, it's Jesus in the garden, but it's Jesus wearing the crown of thorns. So it's when Pilate shows him to the crowd and says, behold the man. So knowing that and putting all three of these things together, I decided to call the triptych Ecce Homo. Behold, and homo does not mean the man. Homo is behold humanity, what it means to be human. And for me, it's a kind of an homage to the survival of faith at a time of faithlessness in a central European city. That's my first triptych. Second one is completely different. What do you see? What do you see on the left? That's hanging prosciutto. Okay. What do you see in the center? I mean, he's beautiful. It's a bronze statue. Anyone know what thing on the right is? Sorry? It is, yeah. It's the foot of the statue of David by Michelangelo. 500-year-old toe, right there. So here's what my thinking was that I put these together. I took a tour of a prosciutto factory. I went to Italy. That's my guide, the prosciutto factory. He was fabulous. It's meat, as I remember Bacon talking about. I can't believe his name is Bacon. He talked about meat, right, in that quote. Okay. These are bronze runners who were dug up from the other city destroyed by Vesuvius, Herculaneum. Magnificent statues of runners. For who made them or why. But they survived absolutely intact. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sculptures of running boys, dating from 2,000 years ago, surviving this incredible destruction of the earthquake. And then the third, I just couldn't get over how damaged that foot was. When you go to the Academia to see, I mean, the David statue reaches this ceiling here. I mean, it is huge. And you go in and you realize it used to be outside in front of the Signoria. They moved it in only about a century ago and put a replica outside. And it's magnificent. But then when I got close to the foot, I realized, oh my gosh, this is really old. And it's really, it's amazing that it could last like this. So I put them all together, and each one has, I got to put it this way, each one has its individual meaning. Each one has its individual, my own experience, sort of, in some ways this is my diary, it's my journal, it's my own experience, but they also, as images, they have their own power. And that's what the triptych artists knew, that individually each of these panels had their own power, but together they made a new thing, a new thing. In a way, it's like metaphor. It's where you say something is something else, meaning that it's what it is. If you get my meaning, or another cliche is the whole means more than the sum of its parts, and that's how triptychs operate. And for me, that's the Trinity. The whole is equal to more than the sum of its parts. So I call this, I put this together having just seen an amazing opera by Terence Blanchard called Champion. You saw Champion, yeah. It's about a prize fighter, and but there's a song by, there's an aria there, and the aria, the title of the aria is, What Makes a Man a Man? Oops, sorry. What makes a man a man? And I thought, okay, that's my title. What makes a man a man? In some ways, it's related to ecce homo. Okay. But there's the sort of secular version of, because for me, it shows both unbelievable beauty and resilience. These statues should not be around, okay? But also unbelievable beauty and deterioration. And someday, that statue will be gone. That's what happens. And how do we, and how are we different from just hanging bunches of meat? Okay. Anyway, that's me. And now let's get away from men and go here. This is my last one. This is actually my favorite one. What is the motif that connects them all? Hands, hands, all about hands, all about hands. And this again is, again, we're in Italy. Here's what they are. This one, it's the shrine of Saint Anthony of Padua. That is the tomb of Saint Anthony. People come to this place to pray for lost causes. And they leave photographs of people they're praying for attached to the tomb. The tomb is over the top, Baroque. And what I loved about it is, what you do is, it's like today's gospel. They wanted to touch Jesus because power came out of him. So the tradition here is that you want to get close to the tomb of St. Anthony and touch the tomb while you're praying. It sort of connects you to the tomb. And what I loved about it was the sign. It says, this is after the pandemic, touch the grave only with sanitized hands. In 3 languages. And so that's what these ladies are doing. They're holding their hands up to the tomb and they're praying. That's the first set of hands. The second set of hands. This is a statue of Saint Irene of Thessalonica, who is the patron saint protecting Naples from thunderstorms. So she's holding out the hand, protecting Naples from destructive thunderstorms, letting the lightning. You gotta love the Neapolitans. I mean, their saints are like over the top. Okay, and yeah, here she is. She's sort of holding her hand out and stopping the lightning. Unbelievable. That's gold, by the way. That's real gold going into her hand. And then the third one is one of the most remarkable sculptures in all of Italy. And this is a room-size grouping of terracotta statues surrounding the dead body of Jesus. And the 2 women here are the women who come to the grave, and one on the far right is Mary Magdalene. These are terracotta. They're made of terracotta. They're life-size, and they're grouped in a chapel in the Basilica of Sant'Antonio della Vita in Bologna. And it's a very interesting thing to do, to go there, because some people are there for the art. Some people are there for devotion. And some people are there not knowing why they're there, but they're drawn to it. For me, it sort of it crosses all the T's and dots all the I's of the nature of, or the use of religious subject in extraordinary works of art. I mean, I don't know how you do terracotta statues like that. That is just amazing. And so I put them together, and I entitled the triptych, Touch the Tomb Only with Sanitized Hands. Touch the Tomb Only with Sanitized Hands. Actually, this is my favorite one. And again, what I love about this process is that you the more you look at it, I like to think, the more you contemplate it, the more connections you might try to make. Okay? especially about, just think about, I had a foot in the other one. Well, hands, and what hands can do. And how often in Scripture, Jesus' touch is so important. And here, touch is what seems to be the primary goal, at least in that one. That one, she's protecting, and here the hands are simply terrorized. So the hands themselves are so expressive of a religious sensibility, So anyway, that's that one, and so the rule of three, okay, seems to me to be a useful way into both the joy and the mystery, and sometimes the terror of imagining Scripture, imagining God, imagining religion, exercising, how to put it, exercising the faculty of sight in a way that introduces you to the faculty of sight as an avenue to contemplating touch. Touch, sight, touch, smell, the five senses. One of the things that have always been interesting to me in art galleries, I have a story. My mother, who was she's a wonderful woman, but she's not highly educated. But we were in New Haven when I was in graduate school, and we went to the new Gallery of British Art, and there was this Turner painting. It's an incredible Turner painting, all dark clouds, but in the middle there was this fire burning. And Turner was, he did a little bit of impasto, the fire is on. And my mother was so, I love it, and she just wanted to touch all right. But that impulse for the tactile is something that artists are always trying to sort of trick you, especially painters, to trick you into saying that this is actually an experience that you can have. Which is why, again, for me, these ladies on the left are, for me, exemplary of the desire of connection with these images, desire for connection with the story, with the incident, with the truth, whatever you want to say, that is, as the icon writers would say, you see through the icon to the reality. You see through the image to you see through the image to the Godhead. And of course, it helps when it's beautiful. When it's beautiful. I wouldn't say that anything that Francis Bacon ever painted was beautiful. In fact, it's very challenging to see any of his paintings. But you see his impulse. His impulse was to take what he saw as the power of these images and to translate them into his own sort of secular sense of loss and of humanity against humanity. So that's my story. Here's the deal. I mean, if you're going to travel around Europe, take your camera. You never know what you're going to see. And of all the ones, the only of the three, for me, this is the religious one. This is my religious triptych, because it's. If you go outside that synagogue, where is the synagogue? It's a really outside the synagogue is one of the oldest Jewish cemeteries in Europe. The tombs date back to the 13th century. and it's sort of it's preserved as sort of tumble, but it's there, and it's just a labyrinth of tombs. And then you go back into the synagogue and see these names. And then you go out on the street, and there is this huge, weird statue of a man sitting that actually moves, and it has a kind of a circle in his thigh. It's a monument to Franz Kafka, who was a German-speaking Prague writer, who's, I don't know if you've heard Kafka, but it's absurd. It's the absurdity of life in Middle Europe. So to go to see this is, as I, in some ways, it's both life-changing, life-changing, life-enhancing, and life-sobering. That's my triptych of this, and I wanted to try to express that in this juxtaposition of images. So that's my story. Thank you for being patient. I have no idea whether this is, has legs, but I'd love to have your reflections or impressions about this. Have you traveled? Have you ever been tempted to put together different images? And if you haven't, that's fine. What do you think of this?
I just have a question not related to
Sure.
the religious aspect of this. But are you aware of any brain studies or psychological studies that explains why humans are so naturally attracted, particularly visually, to groupings of three? What is it about?
Yeah, you know it? Yeah.
They've studied babies, very young babies, can distinguish the difference between 1, 2, and 3. But if you put more things in there, if you're showing pictures and you have, say, a statue and 2 candles, those are different. But if you then do 2 statues and 2 candles, the baby recognizes that there's a sameness to that. And that works with 3 also, but not after. So we're kind of wired for 3.
I've stunned everyone into silence.
Can I ask a general question about when you go into an art museum and you want that to be this, not necessarily a devotional experience, or you just are going to an art museum, what are some principles that you use as you're moving around, things you're paying attention to inside of you, things just to help us, give us some tools next time we are in the midst of art? How are you moving about, and what are you thinking about?
It's important, especially in these huge places, to go in saying, I will stop when I feel like I have an encounter, and that will be enough. That will be enough. You know about this, you ever hear about the Stendhal complex? Stendhal was a French writer in the early 19th century, and he would go into the Louvre, and he would faint, because he'd be overwhelmed, and he would faint. And that's now called the Stendhal complex, that often people go into museums, and they've seen too much, and they can't see anything. So that's the first thing I would say. And then the second would be what I said to my students. When you're tempted, if you're caught if your attention is caught, stay still. Stay still. Don't be afraid to look. Because often you're going to find things in just 2 minutes that you would have missed in the 30 seconds. And everything from, for me, it's and of course it varies. When you go to the Art Institute, which has this great Impressionist collection, and people, when you watch people. I actually, in museums, I like watching people as much as I like Impressionists. People just jam into the Impressionist exhibition, partly because the subject matter is so accessible. I know what I know what a boat looks like. I know what pretty women look like. I know what Paris looks like. But there's the thing about the Impressionist stuff is that it's also the texture of the painting itself. That for me, I love to try to imagine, because especially if with Impressionist art, you can actually follow the brushstrokes, And then you can imagine the painter, these brushstrokes actually express the energy of the painter at the time. Another piece that it took me a long time to figure out how to like this is Jackson Pollock, who some of you remember. He's the guy who does the splash paintings. Okay, and you know that in the 1950s, the famous thing is my 3-year-old can do that, but in fact your 3-year-old can't do that because it's right to call them action paintings because what you do, what you can see, you can't touch it. God won't let you. But what you can see is in some ways a kind of it's a stop action moment of a tremendous act of expression. So I like that. You know, I didn't used to like that, but now I like that. Okay. In Europe, you get overwhelmed with Madonnas and children. Okay. Everybody was asked to paint a Madonna and child because that's what you wanted in your house. Also, one of the things I realized as I was going through all these galleries in Europe is that there was a moment in Western art when the church stopped paying. And when the church stopped paying for art, the subject matter expanded hugely. So one thing that also attracts me to galleries is not just the object itself, but the history of the object. And you know, since the Second World War, that has become actually a highly charged topic because many art galleries have art objects that if you trace the history of the object, they were taken from a Jewish home and now need to be, there was a movie about the Klimt painting, remember that? But just to know why it was painted and for whom and to what purpose. And then you step back and you look again at what it is, for what it is. But again, it's my motto, the more you know, the more you know. And sometimes with some things, you don't want to know. You know, some of these, how did these things all come to the Art Institute? Well, some people had a lot of money. And some people, who got the tax write-off? I mean, there's all kinds of sort of issues that arise about sort of cultural heritage and cultural property that also can haunt you when you walk into it. It's a long answer to the question. But
I moved to share a Louvre story. Cheryl and I lived in Little Rock, Arkansas, and in front of the airport they've got a razorback. And we weren't very happy in Little Rock, and we're thinking, who's got a razorback, a pig, in front of their airport? So we went to the Louvre, I think actually when we lived in Little Rock, and we were going up the staircase, crowded people. All of a sudden, the stairs open. What do we see? The razorback in front of the airport. I thought, oh my goodness, once again, I don't know anything about the world that I live in.
But now you do.
Now I do.
That's the whole point, right? Now you do.
I'm humbled once again.
Well, thanks for, is there a question back there? Yeah.
As a rector, minister, do you think some people in your parish experience God visually, and you are a man of words as well? How do you discern when people have a deeper experience of God when it's visual, or do you even think that's possible?
Yeah, I think it is possible. I mean, there was a time in my life when I said my religious experiences happen more often in art galleries than they do in churches. I don't think that's the case. But just take my parish in New York. It was in Greenwich Village. It was in an architecturally significant block. We owned the entire block. There were federal-style housing. That was our patrimony. We had a school. We had the third oldest continuously occupied church building in Manhattan, which is saying something. And we had a lot of artists in the parish. But in 1991, before I took the job, in the early mid-'80s, there was a huge fire in that parish. The building was chock full of statues and paintings and works of art, and they all burned, all got destroyed. Church was rebuilt, and they decided to rebuild simply. So when you walk in, it feels a bit like almost a colonial experience. But at the front is this rich, a rich mahogany canopy and some amazing works of art that are created by the parishioners. So my sense is for me, that's an emblem of the difference that people have in the churches. Some people love the simplicity of this side of the church, and other people love the visual richness of the rest. I guess what's important to me is as a rector, is to recognize that there's a spectrum of religious experience. That one does not fit all. I mean, I have no idea whether there are people, even now among us right now, saying, yeah, right, fine, talk to me. Or there are people who deal much more with hearing things than with seeing things. Music rather than visual art. There are some people who say, I'm just going to read. I'm just going to read. So in some ways, as a leader of a parish, I thought my job was to cultivate what needed to be cultivated. My own personal life was important because I preach from what I know, but on the other hand, you recognize that it's sort of like when you teach in a school, there are different learning styles. There are different worshiping styles. There are different, actually, mystical styles. And that's important also to recognize. Yeah. Seth, thank you. You guys are great. I love this.